Hey there. So, I got part 6, the Shadows of the Galaxy card review. This week, got about 23 cards, I think, to talk about. This happens to be, I think, a pretty exciting week of new cards. There's going to be a lot of competitive cards, I think, that I'm going to be talking about here. And I'm going to jump right into it. We're going to start with Rokai Gunship. It's a 2-1 in red that costs 2. It has the Underworld tag and a when defeated that deals 1 damage to a unit or base. So this is a nice little 2-drop ship, I think. I think specifically in a couple decks that can utilize its when defeated more effectively. So something like Palpatine Red right now, I think is pretty interesting because sacking this gives you 2 damage. I think there's a leader we're talking about later, Cad Bane, that works with Underworld cards, and this is an Underworld card. So you get synergy with him. You get synergy with McClunky as well, a card that comes up a lot. Overall, this is going to trade pretty decently into most other 2-drop ships. Things like A-Wing, Restored Arc, Kylo Ren's TIE Fighter. Like, this trades with all of those 1 for 1. It has that leftover value engine with like the ping, so it can shoot something down the ground if you need it to. Overall, I think it's a pretty good card. It's not incredible. It's not going to be in every red deck, but I think there's a few places that could definitely utilize a card like this. And yeah, that's what I got on it. All right, Triple Dark Raid. It's an interesting event. It's a rare and villain yellow. It's searching the top 7 cards of your deck for a vehicle. You can then play it, and it would cost 5 less, and it comes into play ready. And then it returns to your hand at the end of the phase. So this is similar to Sneak Attack. Sneak Attack, instead of returning to your hand at the end of the phase, defeats the unit. And also Sneak Attack only cheats 1 resource on the unit. This technically cheats 2. It costs 3, but it reduces the cost by 5. So you can play something like a Ruthless Raider or a Fett's Fire Spray for 4 with this, if it happens to be on the top 7 cards of your deck. And that's clearly where the weakness of this card is. It's unpredictable. You're searching the top 7. If you don't find a good card, right, it really won't do anything. I think the most what you're using this for is the 2 cards I probably mentioned: Ruthless Raider, Fett's Fire Spray, potentially capital ships. But again, it's pretty unpredictable. And in often cases, Sneak Attack, the when defeated is actually relevant. Like with Ruthless Raider, you kind of want it to be defeated at the end of the turn. If you were sneak attacking, well, that's mainly it. Ruthless Raider. But overall, I'm not a huge fan of how unpredictable this card is going to be. I haven't gotten a chance to really jam it in a deck with a bunch of good targets yet, but you're at the mercy of the top of your deck, and I'm not super excited for this kind of lottery, but if it's very consistent, then I think similar to Sneak Attack, it's going to be a high upside card that's mainly going to be used in some yellow aggro deck that plays aggressive ships because, it's coming back to your hand. You're losing a bunch of tempo by playing this. It's there to, hit your opponent's base for a bunch of damage early or to close the game out. All right, Dryden Voss, another legendary. This is in yellow villain. It costs 7. It's a 5/7 shielded. 5/7 is a pretty consistent stat line. It's similar to Darth Vader and Mace Windu. It has a when played ability. It will choose a captured card guarded by a unit you control, and you may play it for free under your control. So this is a huge payoff for capturing, and kind of something I have been waiting for. I think so far capturing, it hasn't been that great. The capture cards themselves are mostly not good, minus a couple. Specifically, I think the yellow one, Relentless Pursuit, is the best capture card currently because it gives a shield to a bounty hunter when that bounty hunter captures something. So it's going to be it more likely that you can actually play something like Dryden Voss to steal that unit. So let's compare it a bit to the 7 costs that do see a bunch of play right now. Darth Vader, Luke Skywalker, Han Solo. So these cards all have very relevant enter the play abilities. They all generally immediately defeat something when they come into play, leave behind a bunch of value. Some of them, like Vader, can theoretically leave extra value. Some of them are just like better units, like Luke. But they all remove something from the opponent's board when they come into play, or that's kind of their point. And this technically doesn't, because the unit that you choose to play with him, the captured unit, is actually already been removed on a previous turn. It's not in play under the opponent's control. So this is not affecting the opponent's side of the board. It is permanently affecting your side of the board and could be bringing in a lot of value. If you capture an important unit, then you're playing like a jacked up Darth Vader, right? Like Darth Vader brings a 3-drop. Well, you captured their 5-drop and you play Dryden Voss, you get your 5/7 and you get whatever they played. So there's a ton of upside here, but there is multiple downsides, right? First of all, if you don't have something to steal with this, this is extremely clunky and extremely slow. Being 7 for a 5/7 shield, it's a good stat line, but it doesn't do anything when it comes into play. And even when it does trigger, if your opponent is putting pressure on you, you're paying 7 to not really affect the board on the immediate turn. You're just adding to your side, but you are not affecting the opponent's side of the board. And sometimes that might be too slow. I do like this as a payoff for capture, and I want really a few more yellow capture cards. Right now, they're really all in green. Basically, all of the capture cards are in green, except for the one yellow one, Relentless Pursuit, which happens to be the best one. Works with bounty hunters, which are currently all villainous. So there are Boba Fett, Bossk, Cad Bane, which we'll talk about later. These are all bounty hunters, so Relentless Pursuit works well with them. And they're all places where I would first look to play something like Dryden Voss. But in order to have enough capture cards, you currently have to play them with green, or you just won't have enough enablers for Dryden. And we'll see if we get some more yellow ones. I think it's notable that they gave this guy a shield, so his body is much more sturdy than all the other 7 drops I talked about. And I think that that's probably a consideration that they made when playing with this, because it probably is way less consistent than all those cards at doing the thing. And even when it does the thing, since it's not doing anything to the opponent the turn you play it, it might not be enough. But there's a really high upside with this and capture in general, and we're going to have to wait and see if we get some more pieces. All right, Qi'ra, new leader. I'm going to probably spend a bit talking about this one, but let's see. So, leader side, it's an action that costs 1, exhausts, and deals 2 damage to a friendly unit, then give a shield token to it. And it's Flip, which is a 5 resource flip. She turns into a 0/8 with Grit that has a when deployed ability that heals all damage from every unit, yours and theirs, and then deals damage to every unit equal to half of their remaining HP, rounded down. So she does hit herself for 4, so she deploys basically as a 4/4, and she halves everything's health. She'll heal everything first and then halve everything's health. All right, so I'm going to talk about the deploy side first. 4/4 is not a very good stat line. I'm aware of that. Like we make fun of IG88 for his 4 health. But you need to understand that the context of Qi'ra is that she is a control leader. This is a blue villain meant to be played as a control deck. And you are the one trading units. You are not really the one that is being aggressive and doesn't want your units getting traded into, like in IG, for instance. Her 4/4, yeah, she dies. Like, she dies to a lot of things, but that's mostly okay, because in decks where you are trying to trade units and protect your health so that you can reach your end game, she comes in, she's a 4/4, she'll trade with something, or they'll have to attack into it, which often they won't even want to do, because again, you're the control. They're trying to kill you, you're trying to kill their units. So what is so important about this when deployed ability? Well, I think it's pretty clear that having all the health of all the units as a control player is pretty good, because everything on your opponent's side of the board is all of a sudden going to be a lot easier to clean up with your other units, right? The Death Trooper that you played the previous turn is probably going to have a clean kill. Your Inferno 4 or whatever in the air is probably going to have a clean kill now. Your Overwhelming Barrage is going to just straight up delete their board if they let that happen after you flip. There's just a lot, right? If you're playing with red, like you can try Bombing Run. That's another card that would probably clean up an arena after a Kira flip. I like green better. I think green blue villain is a premium deck, and I think she is in consideration now, along with like Iden and Krennic, to be that deck, right? That the leader for that archetype. Is she better than them? I'm not sure. Like, I don't know if she's better than Krennic or Iden. They're all a little different, right? Iden, the master heals. Krennic gets a little bit of that heal that Iden does, not as much, but he also affects combat a bit better than Iden does. And that 5 deploy, right? But Kira, she's an event, right? That deploy ability, I mean, it's an event. It does something incredibly impactful immediately. And the other thing it does, right, it has leaders' healths too, right? Boba Fett, when she flips, she hits Boba Fett for 3. So Boba Fett will now trade with Kira, as would most leaders. There are a few that half their health would be more than 4, in which case Kira will no longer trade with them. But a lot of the earlier leaders, or basically all the earlier leaders, she would trade with. I think it's a very powerful ability. She does not have built-in healing, which for blue-green control or blue-red control is sometimes something they need, right? That's why Krennic and Iden are very powerful, right? That those heals matter. But you know what else? Killing all their units earlier is kind of like healing, and she definitely enables that, right? I think we talk about like, oh, you're gonna flip her, and maybe it doesn't kill anything, so it's like not that important. Well, you flip Krennic, it doesn't kill anything either when you flip Krennic, right? All these things, they take an action to get going. Flipping Kira just makes the next action almost certainly it's gonna be very powerful, because if you have another unit in play, that unit's probably gonna get a clean trade. If you, like I said, Overwhelming Barrage is like absolutely massive after that flip. I think all that, you just need to treat this a little differently than you would the other blue control leaders, because her unit is an event built into her. It just plays differently, and you need to actually start playing with this to get an idea of how impactful that flip is. All right, now a little bit on just the unit side. The pay 1 to deal 2 to a unit, give it a shield. It's a pretty powerful ability. It is costly, right? It's not very easy to always squeeze in one. There are a few units specifically that this works really well with. There's the 2 1/4 grits in blue villain. One of them is a 1 cost that has the self bounty, I think like Hydro Enforcer, that makes the opponent draw a card when it dies. The other is the Stormbike Pursuer. On turn 1, the Hydro guy can turn into a 3/2 shield, right? That's a very powerful unit to have against aggressive decks. It's probably not a unit you want against control decks, because you don't want to give them a card, but I think it's a card that you would probably include in a Kira deck for aggro matchups, because that is a really strong opener. And similarly, the 1/4 grit, the Stormbike that costs 2, well, on turn 2, you can first action, buff it up. It turns into a 3/2 shield. It's ready, so it can now start jamming, right? When Krennic plays that card, and it's pretty good in Krennic, it has to spend turn 2 attacking into something just so that it can then boost up its own power, while Kira can kind of boost it preemptively. It makes you want to run a few more 2-drops potentially, because if you're not going to play a 3 on turn 2, because you have to do that, then you'd want something else to fill that curve. There happens to be another good 2-drop in villain, I think, for her. The 2/3 Sentinel, it's like not an exciting card, but a 2/3 Sentinel that you then ping and give a shield to and becomes a 2/1 Sentinel is incredibly annoying for a lot of decks, right? It's not great. It might not even kill anything, but it's going to stall 2 attacks. that's important, right? Like the decks that can kill that after you shield it are not the decks you want it in against anyway. Like if people are playing like Make an Opening, right? If people are playing Make an Opening, you don't like against you. You're probably not playing Pike Sentinel 2/3 cent like the 2/3 and like shielding it, right? It's for aggro. It's a different thing, right? And those early units are going to help a lot against aggressive decks. Even against some mid-range decks that don't have clean ways to interact with those grit units that have shield. It's all a way to bridge to her flip, which is then a way to bridge into the traditional endgame that the blue villain decks have, whether it's stuff like Darth Vader into like Reinforcement Walker in green. If they're playing red, they're probably just playing more of like a Vigilance loop package. Not my style, but worthwhile considering here as well. All right, there's a lot of words about Kira. I think she's good. I don't know if she's better than Krennic or Iden. I just think you got to try it. You got to see what it feels like to play a leader like this that has a powerful when deployed. That's kind of like an event, right? We've seen that on Palpatine. We don't see that on many leaders. So it takes maybe a little bit of time to really comprehend how she plays differently than a lot of other similar leaders. All right, Lone Pike. It's a 4-cost 4/6 in villain blue. It has an on attack that it may give a shield to a token to an enemy unit. If you do, give a shield token to a friendly unit. Notably, you have to give the shield to the enemy. So if the enemy has no units in play, you cannot shield one of your own units. It's like a prerequisite. And it has a smuggle for 5. So the text on this card is incredibly situational. It's useful in some cases, especially when you're in blue villain and you're probably playing things like Takedown, Power of the Dark Side, Make an Opening, things that can kill through shields. So sometimes just like throwing a shield on some space unit that you were going to kill with a removal, giving itself a shield and killing something is strong. But often the text on this card is not incredibly relevant. But I think this card is incredible regardless. I mean, the smuggle for 5, it's just a game changer. This is kind of exactly a mid-rangey kind of unit that a control deck would want to include, but often would have to resource. There's like cards like Gideon and Rook and Steadfast Battalion and whatever 5/4 drop range unit that you often have to resource early and then wish you had some mid-rangey unit to play later in the game and like next to one of your removal. This is that. The fact that this has a smuggle for an incredibly reasonable cost, 5, you're getting 10 stats worth of numbers for 5 as a smuggle, which is, you get 5 5s for 5 all the time. So you're not particularly happy about it, but hey, this is getting played from your resource row. I think this is one of the best smuggle cards we have seen so far. And, it's not a bad 4-cost unit. 4/6 is a very relevant stat line. There are situations where you're just happy to play this on 4 to set up your next turn. Again, we always come back to Overwhelming Barrage. It is such an important card, and having a 4-power unit the turn before that is almost guaranteed to survive that turn into an Overwhelming Barrage is quite strong. Everything on this card is upside, from the text to the smuggle to the numbers. It's not flashy at all. Like, I barely even noticed this when it was previewed. I was just like, oh, like a mid-range unit. Like, I didn't piece it together until like I read it over and over again and then started testing with it. But the card's very good. I would consider this likely to be a staple in blue villains going forward, purely because of the smuggle. It's going to just smooth out end games so much to have a powerful unit to play out of your resources. All right, finally one I don't have to spend too much time on. 5-cost Street Gang Recruiter. It's a 4/4 Underworld. When played, you may return an Underworld card from your discard pile to your hand. It might be okay-ish in draft. All right, Rivals Fall. 6-cost blue. Defeat a unit. So blue now, it has removal like all the way up and down the curve. They target different things, different conditions. This one has no conditions. This is the removal that kills anything. It kills leaders. I think it's going to be an important card. It costs 1 more than Vanquish, but also kills leaders. Vanquish, on the other hand, costs 1 more than Fell the Dragon, which kills 5 power or more, which is... So I think Vanquish is kind of getting squeezed from both sides right now, and likely might not be good enough anymore, because in most cases, I think you're just going to rather play this. This makes relying on leaders a little more difficult. It's something like a Darth Vader deck that relies entirely on getting him out. Chewbacca, Chirrut, if you're like going hard on gearing him up, right? This is painful for that kind of strategy. I think it's important that a card like this exists. I don't think this is going to break the game in any way, shape, or form. It costs 6. That's a lot for a 1-for-1 removal. But it is something that from now on, you'll have to consider. It's going to be in the toolbox of blue decks, whether or not they main deck them, sideboard them. Like the total amount of removal they play, there's so much to choose from Takedown all the way up to the Rival's Fall and Super Laser Blast, and down to like Make an Opening and Power of the Dark Side. There's just so much that the deck can't be all of them. Well, maybe it can if you're really into never letting anyone play units. But yeah, this will be important, and it's something we'll have to like learn how to play around. Midnight Repairs is a 2-cost in double blue, so it's a double blue card, the first one we've seen from this set. It heals up to 8 total damage from any number of units. This doesn't heal base. I don't think this card's very good at all. I don't know what kind of situation you want to heal a bunch of damage from your units. I haven't seen many game states where this would be impactful, so it's mostly a pass for me. All right, Bravado is a 5-cost red card. It says if you've defeated an enemy unit, it would cost 2 less, and it readies a unit. So for 3, it could ready a unit if you've killed something before. It's 5 otherwise. You know, we've got Keep Fighting, which costs 2, but has the requirement that it can only ready something that has 3 or less power. We've got Admiral Mahdi, which can ready anything, but the prerequisite is that he has to die, so you kind of have to finagle this. This is the one that just kind of does the thing. It's just more expensive. I think it's interesting. It's very expensive, though, without the ability that make it cost 2 less. But off the top of my head, I think it'd be pretty interesting to try, like, a one-turn kill Vader style deck, which I know has already been tried, but this certainly plays pretty well into a strategy like that. Vader is a 5/8. What you could do is play like Vader's Saber on him, turn him into an 8 power and kill something. You can play Mahdi for 2. You can attack with Vader for 8, kill Mahdi, ready Vader, attack for 8 again, and then play 3 for Bravado. So you've played 2 for the Vader Saber, 2 for the Mahdi, 3 for Bravado. That happens to be 7. Attack with Vader again. That's 24 damage. It's kind of interesting, like, right? That it's kind of a glass cannon sort of strategy. But mostly, this is a card I'm skeptical about being like truly competitive just because of how expensive it is, and paying this much to ready a unit tends to be something you want to do in aggressive decks. But the prerequisite to make this cheaper is to have an enemy unit be defeated, which means you might have needed to attack into a unit just to make this cheaper, unless they traded into one of yours first, which then would definitely discount this. But this is very kind of all in. I don't think it's bad. I'm interested to see if we can make some kind of combo work with it. You can look at Grand Inquisitor too, because readying Grand Inquisitor can potentially ready another unit as well because of his ability. So there's some play for this, and we'll have to test and see if it's like stable enough to actually pull off. Right, Stolen Landspeeder is a 1-cost 3/2. It also has the Underworld. It has a when played, your opponent, if you played it from your hand, your opponent gains control of it. And it has a bounty that if you own the unit, you can play it from your discard pile for free and give it an experience token. So, right, you play it, your opponent gets it, you defeat it, it comes back onto your side as a 4/3, right? So there are, like, something like Bossk, for instance, the leader. You can play this, immediately ping it, and then ping it the next turn, and you'll get it back. It sounds all nice and, like, awesome, but it's kind of not, actually, because, first of all, the unit's going to hit you for 3. if you do that, because you're not going to have initiative. Second of all, when the unit comes back into play under your control, it will be exhausted. So it's on turn 2, your 1-drop that you played on turn 1 is still actually not ready for combat, not ready for any action. It's going to be exhausted as a 4/3. Your opponent's turn 1 play will very easily potentially kill it if it has 3 power, if they want to kill it, and it had already hit you. There's similar things with Cad Bane. We'll talk about it later, but he also pings, so that's something that you can consider with this card. I think mostly you want to be able to kill it on turn 1 if you're going to play it on turn 1. So maybe ISB Agent to finish it off with Bossk or Cad Bane could be interesting, so that you actually get the unit on turn 2. Other than that, a few niche things. I mean, it has a bounty, so it does turn on Django and Chrysanthemum. So just playing it before you deploy them so that you have a payoff for them could be interesting. But I don't love this card. I think it like reads stronger actually than I think it plays out. I think it's, unless you're killing it on turn 1, which again, it's going to require like ISB Agent. You can maybe Tarkin Town it, but I think, am I really interested in paying 5 health just so that I can have a turn 1 4/3? I don't think so. Like, I don't think any of that is good enough. But yeah, like the best case is like play this with Bossk. You probably ping it, you ISB Agent it, you get a 4/3 and a 1/3 on turn 1. You spent 2 cards. That might be good in a hyper aggressive strategy. But yeah, like it's worth playing around with and seeing if it doesn't end up being super clunky. It's just also like, if it's not turn 1 and you're playing this later, it just feels weird to play this later. It like messes with your curve because you have to pay 1, you don't get any unit, you have to spend some resources or time to defeat it just so you get it back. And again, when you get it back, it's exhausted, so it feels slow. Yeah, don't love it. All right, Marauder, 5 cost in green hero. It's a 4/5 ambush in space, so that's kind of already pretty good. Has a when played, choose a card in your discard pile, put it into play as a resource if it shares a name with a unit you control. So that's not super easy to pull off. I mean, I think the easiest leader currently to pull that off with would be Han, because again, you can kind of curate your discard pile because of his ability. So then you can try to time it so you play this when you have a unit out in play that matches something in your discard pile. And you know, I think that when played is mostly an upside. I think you're playing this because it's a 4/5 ambush in space, which is a decent stat line. I think it works very well in Hero Boba because it would ambush as a 5/5. I don't think it really works at all in Hunter, even though it's the Bad Batch's ship, just because Hunter's whole thing is that he wants his resource row to match what's in play. This wants your discard pile to match what's in play. So the only kind of synergy I'm seeing here is that Hunter in general wants you to build a deck that has a lot of cards that share names, which is a little hard right now. It might be easier in the future when we have like 4 different versions of Sabine or something, and then you can like guarantee to trigger this. Triggering this is really nice, and it's a lot of upside. I think units that are a little easier to stick on the board are probably the easiest triggers for this. So stuff like Crafty Smuggler and the Hero 2/2 shielded unit, the droid. Those are decent units because you're probably going to trade them off early, and if you have a second one and play it, it's got a shield, it's more likely to stay in play so that when you play the Marauder, you can get it back. In Hero Boba, the yellow version, you can now ambush in space and on ground from resource 4 all the way to resource 6, because you've got Azutak gunship, you got Marauder, and you got the new Millennium Falcon. On the ground, you've got modded cohorts and like Agent Callus and Syndicate lackeys and Rogue Skirmisher and Mercenary Company. So you can just ambush all day on the ground or in space in that yellow Boba hero deck. So I think this feels a very important niche. I think the stats are just good, and yeah, decent card. All right, Choose Sides is a 7 cost event. It says choose a friendly non-leader unit and an enemy non-leader unit. Exchange control of those units. I don't love cards like this. You're technically 2 for 1ing yourself when you play it. It's like a more expensive Change of Heart, although it is permanent. But Change of Heart is often extremely clunky, and also mostly just used to be a finisher. So this theoretically would also mostly just be used to be a finisher. I don't love it. I think it's too expensive. I think obviously there's going to be like scenarios where, you know, you steal some capital ship for your 2-drop and you win because of it. There's going to be plenty of scenarios where you have this in your hand, you have nothing to do with it. So I currently am pretty low on it. All right, Cad Bane, new leader. He's a yellow villain. He has an ability on the leader side. When you play an underworld card, so unit or event or upgrade anything, you may exhaust this leader. If you do, an opponent chooses a unit they control, deal 1 damage to it. So it's a free ping, and it doesn't cost an action. But your opponent gets to choose where that ping goes, right? Where that 1 damage goes. His deploy is 6. He is a 2/8 with raid 2. And he has the same ability, but now that ping, it does 2 damage instead of 1. And both times this can only happen once per turn, right? Because it's what it says on the unit side, and on the leader side you have to exhaust it. So once per turn. I don't think this is hard to trigger at all. There's plenty of good underworld cards. I think you can already basically make a pure underworld deck in yellow, red mostly, but even some other colors have underworld cards. So that's not hard. I think his ability itself reads a little stronger than it is, just because once you start playing and your opponent starts having more than 1 unit and they get to start choosing where that 1 damage goes, often that 1 damage is completely irrelevant because they're either going to trade off that unit or it just has too much of a health buffer for that 1 damage to matter. And like the math isn't always smooth for you. It's a strong ability because it's free and because it's easy to trigger and doesn't cause an action. And you don't need to make too many deck concessions to do it because, again, you can play a primarily underworld deck. Even right now, even like the decks that I'm playing in yellow villain that have nothing to do with underworld synergy except like McClunky are already pretty underworld dominant because the units are just pretty good. So I think this is pure upside, but it's not amazing. And on the leader side, I mean, he attacks as a 4/8, but he defends as a 2/8. It's not a great body. The 2 damage ping is much more relevant here. But you know, right now when I look at yellow villains, the first thing I have to compare it to is Boba Fett, who is a 4/7 for 5 with a very powerful ability. And I think it's going to take a lot for Cad Bane to kind of surpass that because, you know, Boba Fett's leader is really strong and he has Fire Spray. Now, we are getting Cad Bane's ship. Unfortunately, it has absolutely no synergy with Cad Bane. It's not like come in ready, just like Fire Spray, right? So it's going to be tough to move away from Boba Fire Spray if you're playing yellow villain, especially if you're playing like an aggressive yellow villain deck, which I still think the underworld package for Cad Bane is aggressive, so he kind of has to be aggressive. But then I think I would just mostly currently be looking at Boba Fett. But I'll definitely be working on Cad Bane. I think it's interesting. I have to see like how relevant we can get this ping to be because it seems sometimes like it's that 1 damage is kind of getting wasted when it's going on the wrong units. It's also interesting to me that Cad Bane has incredibly bad aim, apparently. All right, Covert Strength. 1 cost blue card, heals 2 damage from a unit and gives an experience to it. And it has a smuggle for 3. So I don't think it's very good. Smuggle's interesting though. All right, Rule with Respect. This is a 4-cost green hero card. It is a legendary. It's an event. It says a friendly unit captures each enemy non-leader unit that attacked your base this phase. So everything that went to your face is getting captured by 1 unit. Like the effect is clearly powerful. It's just how difficult is this going to be to like actually pull off and squeeze into a turn. If you want to capture multiple units, you need multiple units to have hit you in 1 turn. So we're talking about a lot of action back and forth before you can even play this card to its full value. If you want to steal like 2 or 3 units, you need to have a unit in play that can capture those units. And you need to be able to like resource churn to some degree, right? I mean, on turn 3, it's going to be kind of hard to pull this off. You're just going to sit there and say pass it 4 times until they attack with everything. I mean, I think this is going to get some people in a situation like that, right? They're going to like attack with a couple units on turn 1, turn 2, turn 3. And especially if you had other units in play, instead of trading with their units, maybe you're attacking them back. They deploy something else. You then capture everything they had onto something that hopefully they can't immediately trade with. That could steal a game, because if they can't like immediately free all the units you capture with this, it's like going to be incredibly hard for them to come back. Even if they do eventually kill it, everything that comes back comes into play exhausted. It's going to buy a ton of time. A deck that's playing this is probably trying to buy time, so I expect that would be moving them towards their game plan. But I think this card is mostly kind of clunky. I think it's a little more expensive than I would have liked this effect to be, but it probably would have been too strong if it was cheaper. And there's just like very corner case scenarios that I think it can be good, and they all involve playing against like really go wide face heavy decks. Like right now, maybe Sabine Yellow would be a deck that you could play this against and maybe get them, like steal a couple units. It would be hard even against the green Sabine, because they have Energy Conversion Lab to potentially immediately kill the unit that you are using for capture. So yeah, wait and see on this. I don't think it's going to be a huge player. Bounty Hunter's Quarry. So we got another bounty in green. It costs 1. You attach to the unit, and if the bounty says search the top 5 cards of your deck, or the top 10 cards of the deck if the unit is unique. And then you look for a unit that costs 3 or less and play it for free. This card seems really good to me. It's a 1-cost card that gets you a 3-cost unit. I think the issue with bounties a lot of the time is that they don't give you any sort of card advantage or card parity. They just give you like some ability. Like Guild Target, it's great, right? It does 3 damage, but then like you just lost your card, it's 3 damage. And that 3 damage won't matter if you can't finish them off. Same with like Wanted, the yellow one. Same with even the Experience one, which leaves a little bit of value behind. But this one is like straight up generating card advantage, because you are paying 1 to get a 3-cost unit from your deck. If you're playing this with Bosk and get a double trigger with it, you can get 2 3-cost units from your deck. This one, I am very happy about this bounty. I think it's one of the better bounties we've seen so far, if not the best. And yeah, I mean, it's just going to be good. Like the fact that Boss can ping any unit with bounty means that playing this on turn 1 alongside another 1-drop, especially if that 1-drop is like Dengar or something, but even if not, right, you can play this. Boss is going to be able to kill that unit over 1, 2, or 3 turns with his pings. You're going to get your 3-drop for that 1 cost. You're generating tempo that way. Yeah, pretty happy with this, and definitely interested to play it in some green Bosk. Potentially some other things too. All right, Lady Proxima is a neutral card. It costs 1. It's a 0/4 with the Underworld trait, and it says when you play another Underworld card, you may deal 1 damage to a base. Yeah, like this could represent a decent amount of base damage. The problem is, I think that if someone cares enough, they'll kill it for free because it has no power, so they'll just be able to kill it. And if they don't care enough, they're just going to let it sit there and ping them over and over again because they don't care. That's kind of the issue with 0/4s, right? Is that when they die for free. Like you often don't even need to spend a card to kill them. Just 1 attack from something, potentially, if that thing has 4. I think like if someone wants to spend 2 attacks to kill it with like a 3-power unit, and it's kind of healing you 6, that's decent. But overall, I don't think this is going to make the cut in most decks. Even like a Cad Bane deck, I'd be iffy on whether or not it's good enough. And speaking of Cad Bane, here's his ship. Xanadu Blood is a 6-cost in yellow villain. It's a 4/6 ship. So, you know, it's got Vet's Fire Spray's cost. Let's see if we get something close to its power level. It's got Raid 2, so it actually hits harder than Vet's Fire Spray on offense, not on defense. Has both a when played and on attack that you may return another friendly non-leader underworld unit to its owner's hand if you do exhaust an enemy unit or resource. So when you play it, you can bounce one of your underworld cards to exhaust something, and then you can keep doing that on attack. That something could be anything, right? It could be a leader, it could be some giant unit, and it could be a resource. It's decent when played, although quite costly, right? Bouncing your own units is not great all the time. I mean, ideally, these underworld decks are going to be playing cheap underworld units that you're not like feeling too bad about bouncing back, like Crafty Smuggler, Dr. Eve is in, even the one-cost stuff like Greedo, Reckless Gunslinger. I think this coming in and being able to exhaust something is pretty strong. Threatening to do that on the crackback next turn, pretty strong. I do not think it's as good as Fire Spray, or even close to as good as Fire Spray, which, you know, it matters because Fire Spray exists and Boba Fett exists. So you're choosing to play a yellow villain deck, and you can play it in conjunction with Fire Spray in a Boba deck, and I think that's actually pretty reasonable because Boba is probably going to be playing a bunch of underworld cards. But yeah, I think this is a good card. I don't think it's not game breaking, but I think it's going to do some really important things in yellow villain. It's a decent finisher. It hits really hard. It can help with racing because of the exhaust ability. This exhaust stuff is not going to be like incredibly easy to constantly pull off because you have to keep bouncing your unit, right? If you had like one other underworld unit in play, you bounce it when you play Xanadu Blood. Next turn, you do not have an underworld unit to bounce. So if you want to use Xanadu Blood's ability again, you would first have to play your underworld unit. At which point, you're leaving yourself open to interaction, right? They could defeat the ship. They could defeat the new unit you just played. So I don't think you can expect to just be using its on attack and when played all the time. But certainly, I think you can do it once when it comes into play, and that's going to be pretty impactful, right? When this comes in and your opponent was expecting to hit you for something, or even if they had like 3 resources and like they were expecting to be able to play an important 3-cost card like a Power of the Dark Side or something, and you exhaust that resource, you can really mess with some people's plans. And yeah, it's a pretty good card. All right, here's another pretty good card. It's Maul. Luckily for us, he's not a legendary. He's a 7-cost villain green unit, and he's a 7/6 Force Underworld. He has Ambush and Overwhelm, so he's a 7-power Ambush Overwhelm. He also has an on attack. You may choose another friendly Underworld unit. If you do, all combat damage that would be dealt to this unit would be dealt to the chosen unit instead. So Maul ambushes something. Let's say it hits back for 5 or whatever. You could take that 5 damage and put it onto another Underworld unit. Bonus points if that other underworld unit is like Crafty Smuggler and has a shield, just absorbs all that damage. Maul's a beast of a finisher. That Ambush Overwhelm combo is huge. 7 is huge. It one-shots tons of leaders. It can deal tons of overwhelm damage. This could theoretically be better than Darth Vader in some decks. First, you can look at like Boba Green right now, which tends to be more aggressively slanted. Often the Vader unit that comes with it is not amazing. If he doesn't hit like Boba Fett or 7th Fleet specifically, his pool of villainous units hasn't been incredible. So like, is this better? I mean, what if it comes in and kills something important, deals like 4 overwhelm damage? It could be pretty game breaking. It doesn't even have to be instead of Darth Vader. I think a lot of decks could just play both. This is another Force card to play with Palpatine's Return in a package with Darth Vader and potentially Emperor Palpatine. You've got a plethora of big boys to just come in. This card's strong. You know, it's not leaving behind as much value as Vader. So like, I think control decks will likely still want to play Darth Vader over it, especially the blue ones that can get like Death Trooper and have like really mean Vader turns. And I think if you're not playing Underworld units and you're just using this as like a big removal, then it's similar in many ways to something like Mace Windu, although it's going to be better in terms of dealing base damage. So again, because of that, it slants, I think, towards a more aggressive deck and probably as its top end, as opposed to more control decks that rather just generate more value. Because a lot of the value this is generating is base damage. It's very good. All right, Sinara San is a 4-cost villain blue card, 3/6 with grit. It has a bounty on it that says deal 5 damage to a base. So when this dies, but the bounty is only while this unit is exhausted, she gains that bounty. So once she's attacked something, she will then have this bounty that will then deal 5 to your base. This one confuses me a little bit because I'm not even sure if this was just a 3/6 grit for 4. I think that would be good in basically Grand Inquisitor and mostly not anywhere else. This negative bounty is incredibly negative though. This actually comes into play exhausted, right? So if they kill it immediately, you're taking 5. I think you can look at Grand Inquisitor with this because again, you can ready her the turn she plays. Comes in, she becomes a 5/4. She can attack for 5. And then the next turn starts. Ideally, right, she hasn't been killed, and then she's ready as a 5/4, and you can just like sit it there. And then if they want to kill it, they kill it, but you don't take the 5. And if they don't want to kill it, you can trade it into one of their units and hope, but you'll take 5, or you can go face again, right? Are you racing at this point? Like, who's winning that race if you're taking 5 to your base just by this dying? I am really skeptical that this is good enough on rate, even with Grand Inquisitor, because of how punishing that bounty is. But that would be the place I would try first, because if it's not good there, it probably isn't good anywhere. All right, Kragan Gore is a 6-cost in villain. He's a 6/6. It says when an enemy unit attacks your base, give a shield token to a friendly unit in the same arena as the attacker. So they go base, they start shielding you start shielding your units. You use those units to then kill the things that attack your base, right? I think this is too slow as a 6-cost 6/6 that doesn't have any immediate impact. Again, it's like it's there to protect your base. Kind of, right? I mean, they're still hitting your base. But if you're like in sort of base race sort of situation, or you're a control deck that wants to stop people hitting your base, I don't think playing a 6/6 do nothing is usually the answer to those strategies. And then if you're not playing against strategies that are just going face, they're probably just gonna go on to this guy, right? Because he does provide a lot of value if they start like randomly attacking your base with dinky units and you start shielding your units and killing those dinky units. So I think this is a draft bomb because, I mean, being in just villain means that it can go in any villain deck. It's going to be very good in draft. Draft combat, like the 6/6 stats are pretty good in draft, but I don't think this is a constructed power level card. This is a constructed power level card. It's Cobb Vanth. It costs 3. It's in green. It's a 3/2. Has the fringe and official tag. I think the official here might not be super relevant because I don't think this is here to turn on Emperor's Royal Guard, but maybe. Has a when defeated, search the top 10 cards of your deck for a unit that costs 2 or less and discard it. For this phase, you may play that card from your discard pile. So you don't immediately get the 2 cost. It goes into your discard pile, but you can play it at any point during the turn after that. So it's good, right? This is value. This is a lot of value built into one card. It's 2 units for the price of 1. Now, his front side is not on rate for 3-cost units, and then it's getting a 2-drop, right? So what kind of deck wants something like this? It's usually like a mid-range value deck, because I don't think it's quite good enough for like a hard aggro deck, because hard aggro doesn't really want to play a 3/2 on the second turn. It's going to die to everything. It's not going to hit their opponent's base. Then the 2-drop's going to come in. It's going to be exhausted. It's not moving them along in their plan. And I don't think control decks really want to play this because the 2-drops that they end up getting are probably not super impactful, and this unit itself might not be able to trade well enough as a 3-cost 3/2. But mid-range decks will really love this card. I think like a Han deck, for instance, will really like this. Han, sometimes even being a little short on cards, could benefit from having like just a card that is a 2-for-1 built into itself. Another leader that I think would really like this card is Gideon, because Gideon can make this guy attack as a 4-power unit, and then Gideon loves cheap, dinky units to like put on his board because they can all attack with 1 extra power with his ability. So like the 2-drop that it gets off of Cobb will also probably be pretty impactful. And then, you know, I think there's going to be a lot of other places to look to play this, just because the rate is quite strong. But I think you're going to want to look more towards value mid-range as opposed to hard aggro or hard control for this card. All right, Krayt Dragon. It's another legendary. It's a big one. It's a 9-cost in red. It's a 10/10. It has Overwhelm. It has a when an opponent plays a card, so any card, you may deal damage equal to that card's cost to their base or to a ground unit they control. So, big cost, big finisher, right? So, where does it stack up to these other cards that cost like 9, like Relentless, Avenger? It's in the same vein as like Devastator too, right? Big finishers. So, in some places it could be better. In a lot, but in one specific place, I think it's worse than most of those cards. Not Relentless. Relentless is a completely different style card meant to counter control strategies, but like Avenger and Devastator, when you're behind on board, this card is terrible. When you are not ahead or at parity, playing this does absolutely nothing, and you could essentially just lose the game on the spot if they have any sort of board. So that's not where you want to be. Now, when you're ahead, this basically closes a game harder than like a lot of cards, because your opponent now needs to kill it, and to kill it, they need to either be in blue specifically so they can like vanquish it or fell the dragon it, and they also get domed for a bunch of damage when they do that, or they need to somehow like manage to play units into it, but any ground unit that they play better have more life than it has power, because otherwise the dragon eats it. Right, it deals damage equal to it, or it just starts nugging their base. Right, they play a 4, they hit their base. If they play a 4, you hit their base. You claim, you hit them for 10. Like this, if you're ahead on board and they can't immediately answer this with like a vanquish and take 5, it basically is going to shut the door on them. Because they have to have board presence. It's going to be basically impossible to create board presence on the ground after this. So I guess if they are just a hardcore space deck, they could play a bunch of space units and try to like stall this out with like No Good to Me Dead or something. But mostly you're not losing if you play this when you're ahead. At parity, also it'd be pretty good. You just need to hope that they can't kill it with the units that they have in play, or with some unit they have in play plus some event or something. I mean, you'll still generally get some value at that point. Whether it's 9 cost worth of value, that's debatable. But I think in those two scenarios, Krayt Dragon's going to be pretty good. But again, it is not going to be good at all when you are behind on board. So it doesn't fit in the same mold as something like Avenger, which can often just close a game because you've played control, your opponent plays a unit, you kill, Avenger comes in and clears that unit, creating parity or creating your advantage at that point, and then can close the game from there. Krayt Dragon does actually nothing when you play it, so it's a different beast. We also now, because it's red, we have to think about what kind of decks. I mean, obviously, I think you have to play it with ramp, so green-red. So that's where I'd probably be looking right now. Maybe green-red, maybe Vader wants to play this as a new top end for that deck. Vader tends to be pretty aggressive, actually, because, you know, he does damage to base. A lot of his units do. So then this can come in and kind of put the nail in the coffin. because if you've dealt enough base damage, then this just represents like lethal potentially to their base as a unit. And if they play like cards onto the board and you just hit their base, you can close out a game that way. I think it's interesting. We'll see if it breaks into competitive. I think there's a chance that this can see some play. It's just not in a style of deck that I think has yet to be viable. All right, this one was a very long video, even though it was only 23 cards. I think I had a lot to say about a lot of these cards. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope some of this helped in your own analysis and will kind of help you navigate like deck building with some of these cards. Let me know what you think. If I got it completely wrong on anything, feel free to tell me. Please like the video. Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't. It means the world to me. And until next time, take care.